Hi, everyone. It's so great to see the office looking so busy. We have basically only just moved into the office. It's only been open for about 2 months, so we opened it at the start of this year. And for anyone who already knows EF, then you'll know that this was an enormous change for us. We have typically just been in Europe and in Asia. We've been backing the most exceptional builders and founders in those regions, and then supporting them to build startups from scratch. Increasingly, we saw those companies coming out to the US and raising here. And so about this time last year, we thought, what could happen if we relocated our companies out to the US, ran a fundraising program, ran a demo day. It ended up being really incredible. The pace, the intensity, the trajectory of all of the companies when they moved out here and all of the founders was just really incredible to see. And so now we're here full time. We've got a current batch running a fundraising program of nearly 40 companies who typically work upstairs, so that's where all of our desks are. And tonight you're going to meet 8 of the companies who are going to be presenting. Tons of audience participation is very much encouraged, so any questions or anything that you have for any of the demoists, please put up your hand and we'll try and cover them. But to kick us off, for the first 20 minutes, we've got 3 brilliant people with lots of different backgrounds to join us for a panel chat. Let's start by doing some introductions from each of you, and I'll pass down my mic as well. And then maybe with your introduction, you can start. You've got the mic. With your introductions, maybe you can also tell us the most interesting advancement or AI project that you are most excited about right now.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Can you hear? Can you hear this?
Yeah.
Excellent. My name is Rohit. Pleasure to be here, and great to see everybody, and excited for this discussion. I'm trying to think of what the most succinct way of introducing myself here is, which is turning out to be really complicated. Spent many years across many different countries, Singapore, London, recent entrant to the West Coast, been in AI for in and out as various different hats for many, many years, as an investor, now as a founder. And I'm currently the Chief Product Officer of Bodo, which you can probably see somewhere behind me. The most interesting thing that I'm most excited about, it's really hard to explain, but you know what, I'll go with something easy. I'm excited to see agents finally functioning properly and writing code for us.
Excellent.
Hi everyone, I'm Pippa. I will also try and be succinct. My background is mainly in product. I worked at a large fintech company. Then I was at an AI startup, leading the research team there. And now I have just transitioned over to the investor side of things at EF, leading our defensive AI cohort for the last 6 months, as well as now helping backfill in the SF office with our large cohort of 40 companies. In terms of what is most interesting, I was just speaking with Rohit about the lab's foray into product. And I think this is a pretty basic take, but deep research is a very interesting development. And what I'm very keen to see is, as we see, the further commoditization of the base model layer, what are the commercial products that these labs will start to come out with, where they can actually, see some of the value at the application layer.
Thank you. I'm Eric. I'm right now at a AI inference startup called BentoML, which specializes in AI inference. And before that, I was at Cloudflare and running their China services. And right now, I'm EF advisors, and very glad to be involved here. I'm a firm believer about open source. So the most exciting project that I'm really deep into is DeepSeek. Have you guys tried DeepSeek chat? Yes, and also they not only open source the models, they also open source 5-6 different repos for their infrastructure, which is amazing.
Cool. Thank you so much, guys. I'm excited to get into it. Maybe let's start with you then, Eric. On the topic of DeepSeek, do you think it's a worthy competitor to OpenAI?
I would now say it's a competition, right? So all of us are trying to achieve AGI, right? We're marching in the same directions, but I would say definitely DeepSeek pushed OpenAI a little bit because I'm not sure if you guys noticed that the OpenAI team ran an AMA on Reddit, I think 2 weeks ago, and Sam Altman mentioned that they are thinking about open source a new model from OpenAI. If DeepSeek haven't open source their models, I don't think Sam Altman or OpenAI gonna say the same thing. And also, I mentioned earlier, DeepSeek not only open source their models, they are open source their whole infrastructure technologies as well. And as a member of AI infra companies, and when they release the repos, we're like, it's Christmas. It's a lot of different things that we can use in our product, which why I firmly believe open source is a way, and people should collaborate openly, and that's, in my opinion, the correct way to march towards AGI.
I mean, I'm in two minds about this, because I think competition is really hard here to define in some easy way, because if you think about the latest models that are released, I mean, let's take Grok, the latest model from XAI, as well as the 4.5. These are extraordinarily expensive investments, and the next generation is supposed to be another order of magnitude more expensive. What DeepSeek proved is that, talent is not particularly bound to one geographical location. As much as I love this fair city, and as a consequence, what this tells you is what their bottleneck in creating a state-of-the-art model that is competitive with the rest of the world is not dependent on whether they can do it, which they clearly can, they demonstrated extremely well, but whether they can get, the next $10 billion in order to be able to get enough chips, build the data centers, and actually, compete. If they can get the resources, 100% I think they are an extremely worthy competitor. And just to underscore also the point that not only have they pushed forward the state-of-the-art across the industry because they went open source, their models as well as their entire inference stack, but also the fact that they could do it, the fact that they did it shows that they could do it. And it was pretty much taken as an article of faith until last year that nobody else can come close without putting in several $1 billion of their money. And it was a fool's errand to try. And at least I'm glad that got falsified, because it at least means there's a lot more people who will try to become competitors.
Although, I mean, on the point of CapEx, I think what's interesting is the current paradigm has been that the closed source labs kind of push the frontier forward, and then the open source models are always about 6 months away from, well, you might say backwards engineering or what have you, right? And so if that is the paradigm that continues, it undermines the business model for all of these closed source labs, right? Because you have to put in an amazing amount of CapEx to reach the benefits, and if there's no, first mover advantage to deploying that CapEx, then what's the point? I mean, obviously we haven't seen, a shift. The labs are still deploying an amazing amount of CapEx into compute and pushing things forward, but I do think that is something to watch.
Yeah, I think maybe just a sort of riff on that for a second. I think the key question is, as DeepSeek was developing R1 and, with the research papers and so on, O1 was already in development, already developed, undergoing safety testing. Nobody's quite sure, but we had the preview come out a few months ago. QWQ kind of existed. So the good news, bad news here, the good news is that everybody sort of knows roughly the things to be done to kind of get there. The entire devil is in the details. If you read the repos they released last week, I couldn't understand half of it because I'm not an infrastructure engineer, and it was extraordinarily low level, and it takes some crack geniuses to be able to figure out, I don't know, how to find things in NVIDIA chips that NVIDIA didn't know and write PTX for it or whatever. But the fact that they could do it shows that it can be done, and I think that existence proof is not to be underrated. So I agree sort of broadly, right? Even now, if I think about what the state-of-the-art model that exists today in the world is, it's probably O3. It's hidden. Nobody can use it except for deep research. It's inside OpenAI. Maybe Claude has something similar, and maybe we'll know in however many months if they actually release anything. But we're kind of flying blind here to some extent.
I'll just add one last thing is a shout out to the Alibaba team. And I encourage you guys to check the new model they released, the Queen QWB models. It's amazing. And also, it doesn't require a lot of GPUs to run like DeepSeek R1, and it's great effort from the Alibaba team.
If we think about the riffing off that open-closed debate and where people should be building, I'm conscious we've got loads of builders, potential founders, current founders in the room. Where do you think people should be building their applications?
You have the mic.
Okay. I think my question to this type of, my answer to this type of question is always, it depends, right? So if you're building B2B SaaS in a regulated industry, right, your customers don't want to pass their data to OpenAI, to Anthropic, and to all those big players. They want their models to host within their on-premise data centers or within their cloud environment, and you don't have any other choice than open source models, or you train your own, right? But if you're application builder building consumer-facing applications, I always encourage you to use the best model possible, which right now seems like OpenAI, Anthropic, or X.AI, the Grok models. And I feel like you can get most of things from those state-of-art models, and also with reasonable cost. One thing to add here, DeepSeek push OpenAI to reduce the price as well.
Yeah, you go first.
I'm rich in microphones.
Yes.
Yeah, I think to echo what you said, it really depends. I mean, I'm kind of going to not answer the question and maybe answer an adjacent question, which is, I think, again, increasingly what's becoming clear is the value is at the application layer, or at least that's where consensus seems to be converging, and that wasn't always obvious. And so it's a great time to be a startup. It's also a great time to be a power law investor. And so I think the question to be asking yourself is less around, closed source, open source, but actually, as the models get better, and you should probably expect them to get better and for the trend lines to continue, does my product get better and get stickier? Or does it essentially get, sonic boomed and eaten up by the base models? That's the thing to think about. That's the thing that all investors will be thinking about when they're looking at your startup is how does this get better? How does this product get better as the models get better?
Yeah, the good news about open source in 2025 is that everybody kind of knows how to make money from open source. The first approximation, the answer is that you don't. But if you do, you can go services, you can do open core, you can actually serve, make it easier, you can give a hosted provider, whatever. There's a bunch of different ways that you can actually make money. So one way that I always thought about open source when I was investing is open source is basically like the B2C world applied to enterprise, right? You're effectively trying to get the largest surface area for people to actually test your stuff out and trust it so that later on, you can use that giant pool of people and monetize it. If you're Facebook, you did that by getting a giant pool of people, giving them a platform, and then doing advertisements against them. It's really hard to do that with DevOps, but you can do it in some adjacent way, right? You can add a service on top and they will yell at you, but at least if you have a good enough product, you get to build Databricks, which is pretty nice. So the way I think about this is that whether you should go open source or closed is entirely a function of, do you have a sense as to what your customers actually want or use? One heuristic is that if you go lower down the stack, you kind of have to be open because interoperability and people need to trust that the stuff does what it says it does. And especially if your customers are engineers, it's much easier because they prefer to use open source for all sorts of normal reasons. Once you go towards models, it becomes a little bit more muddied. I mean, Mistral came up with their OCR model, which is not really open source, unlike their mega models, which are open source. So people are still trying to figure out the right balance between what needs to be open. It can be closed, but hosted in your in your centers if you really wanted to. There's a bunch of different slices you can do towards it. But to a first approximation, I think of open source as a way to get largest surface area of people to actually see and try out your product with the expectation that your monetization strategy will come at some point later, and you can choose which way you want to slice that. But that realistically, yes, it depends on who the audience is. If the only people who will use your products are Fortune 500, then you have a very different thought process about it, as opposed to if it's a, DevOps chatbot tool, for example.
I will say, though, one kind of pitfall to avoid on that front is like there is, again, a great benefit to open sourcing your project, seeing how people use it, right, and then running with that information. But you can fall into a trap where your technology in search of a problem. And that's honestly the hardest part, I think. It's not figuring out the tech thing. It's trying to find a real problem to solve for. And so I think the instinct of a lot of engineers is to like build something cool and open source it and see what happens. But then what ends up happening oftentimes is someone else figures out what the valuable thing about your product is, and they're the one that reap the benefits of that.
Yeah, one thing I want to add is right now is, especially for the model side, it's very hard to define what's open source. Right? And right now, I think the industry standard is basically open weights, which means you have open access. Yep. And if you want to do a step further, you open your paper, like what DeepSeek did. And also you can also your open source infrastructure as well, but not everyone gonna do it. But I do feel nobody gonna open their data set to the public. One thing is because it's like it took a lot of money to clean and label all sorts of things. And the other one is just like a legal risk. Right, and there a lot of people are watching this space, and if the model spit out things that is related to their IPs, the model makers will run into trouble. So this is what I say.
Yep. If you're scraping YouTube, keep it private. I guess that's it.
Can I steal that? Cool, thanks guys. And I guess with all of that in mind and thinking about, Rohit, like your answer to my first question around seeing AI agents actually start working, I guess there's just like a ton of, and this is what we're seeing in all of the cohorts, there's a ton of white space in all of these different industries for there to be really vertical specific agents and applications built. Where do you think some of the lowest hanging fruit is sitting? Or maybe where do you think some of the coolest opportunities are sitting that you haven't seen people work on yet?
I'll start at the other end of the spectrum. I think the part where everybody's working on is code for fairly obvious reasons, because like it's verifiable, it's easy to understand, we all use it. So like it's kind of there's a neat product market fit that happens there. But the flip side of that argument is effectively that if you do create a model that is sufficiently smart that it can figure out anything that you throw into its context, then all of a sudden you don't need it to be vertical specific anymore. But at that point, we probably will have different problems, maybe better problems. So if you keep that aside for sort of a little while, then what that tells you is that process information about any deep, complicated process that exists in the world, which it's full of, for our whether it's in bureaucracy, whether it's in real estate, whether it's in healthcare, insurance, I don't know, name your favorite space. They all have the exact same kind of problems, which basically means that anywhere you actually have domain expertise, you presumably can build a process to actually get the agents to somewhat work. The good news is that as techniques get better, the advantage you build through identifying the process data in the first place will enable you to build better and better agents that hopefully have a symbiotic relationship. And as the core models themselves get better, your things will actually start working. My kind of, the yardstick here is a little bit like Claude Code, which I am obsessed by because it works it works way better than it should. But the fact that it works at all is remarkable, and the fact that it works this well already is remarkable. So you can start thinking about how to modularize, your code base, or you can use it to write reports if you wanted to. Like, it's a little bit like, how do you modularize any kind of process, make it into bite-sized chunks, make the agents work together such that it can give you the output that you wouldn't have been able to get otherwise. And I think that is a extraordinarily generalizable problem. My personal favorite is manufacturing, for what it's worth. Incredibly complicated, highly abstruse, filled with, as somebody who tried to build a startup in the space, filled with facts about how the world works that make no sense. Tailor-made for AI agents who get much less frustrated than I do.
Okay. Yeah. So first, I agree. It's low-hanging fruit is probably code for obvious reasons, but I think there are a lot of heavy hitters in the area. And if you go upstream or downstream, which is like requirement gathering, requirement analysis, and also testing, we have startup's gonna demo some debugging tools as well for tonight. I think that's the natural progressions of the areas you can explore. But I do feel the things, or if you want to start a company, you need to not only find the low-hanging fruit, probably find an area that you most passionate about, because it's a long journey for building a startup. And if you just do it because it's low-hanging fruit, it's easy right now, if you hit any roadblocks, if you have a co-founder breakup, do you have the faith to continue the journey? But if you found, or if you pick one area that you're most passionate about, I firmly believe that you will get through it.
That's good advice. I think that there's a couple things that I'd say here. One is, to echo what you guys said, it's a crowded space. And a lot of people are joining in the AI land grab right now, and specifically the agent land grab. And so one of the things I would encourage all the founders in the room to do is go a little bit deeper than the most obvious low-hanging fruit, because actually what you'll find is that the low-hanging fruit isn't so low because you're competing against basically every other founder in the Bay Area. So if you build another, sales development rep agent, that's going to be really hard, even though it feels like it's really easy and really obvious. And there's a lot of low-hanging fruit if you actually do the work to go really deep in some like different specific niche areas and kind of learn into maybe your specific area of expertise. Let's say you've worked at like a really boring type of company and you happen to know a lot about, incident response, right? You can use that to your advantage. The other thing I would say is that, again, expect the trend lines to continue, expect agents from the core labs to get more generally capable, expect them to get more sample efficient. So in the same way right now that, you might have a new grad that needs some training to be a product manager, or needs a little bit of training to be an investment banker, right? Like the agents you build right now need a little bit of massaging, right? But they'll continually need a little bit less massaging. And so one of the things to think about is, as that happens, right? As the value that you create becomes less in massaging the agent to be better, and the agents are just out the box generally capable, where is your alpha, where is your staying power, right? And my personal belief is a lot of that will come actually in more of like the UI, UX layer, and probably you'll have a lot more staying power in less tech-enabled industries, right? Because if you're, a small business who doesn't really use tech a lot, but somehow I've made Claude now really accessible for you to use, and you're just used to that UI, you're probably less likely to switch, even when Claude becomes generally capable enough to do the same things that whatever my product does. Just because you're used to using that thing, right? And there's a higher switching cost for you. So those are some of the things that I would think about.
And as luck would have it, we do actually have a voice SDR company demoing tonight. So in true SF style, let's get into the demos. Thank you so much to our panelists for all of your insights. And Laneo, I think you're up first.